Over the last 5 years, I've walked over 100 different food forests and syntropic farms across 5 different continents. And today I'm breaking down the 10 most impressive and the things that you can literally copy from each one on your own property. And if you're new to the word syntropic, don't worry, it basically means successional agroforestry, or planting your land so that nature, basically ecological succession, does most of the heavy lifting. Produces more biomass, more natural fertility, and less synthetic fertilizers and poisons, and way less like moving mulch around with a wheelbarrow. I spent time with the black belts in Brazil, Costa Rica, Europe, Florida, Australia, and I test everything that I learn here at the family farm in New Zealand, and I document the process here. So, farm number one of the first projects that really got me obsessed and diving into syntropic agroforestry.
Starting to refoliate. But if you can imagine, this has been full shade and then full sun multiple times. We've cycled this material back into the system several times. If I could do it again, I'd put them in the line. That was a big management mayhem decision that I made, that I learned hard not to put things out of line, but sometimes you have to learn hard.
Number one is Matt Reese in Florida. Now, he is somebody who I've been watching for a long time since I first got into agroforestry. I was learning online. 5 years ago, he was some of the only English content on YouTube for agroforestry, and he's transitioned from doing food forest installations to actually being a farmer. Setting his land up, managing 5 or 6 acres now of syntropic agroforestry. And there's lots that we can learn from his site, from his practice, as he's developed over the last number of years. One of my favorite frameworks that he shared when I was there was kind of the 3-stage process that you go through as somebody who's developing an agroforestry project: collection, evaluation, and then curation.
When I started, it was a collection, and then an evaluation, and then now it's more of a curation. So I went through, I call it the Pokemon phase, gotta get them all. There's 60 varieties of mangoes. Every tree is different. I've been evaluating them for my climate, my context, disease resistance, flavor, production, all that kind of stuff. While I'm still evaluating what I have, I'm growing up the next, basically the foundation of my next forest. What I've done over the last 2.5 years is take my nursery more seriously and grow into a nursery business. So now that I have my evaluation work complete, I can take that and put it into the nursery.
So the first stage is collection. It's kind of in the Pokemon stage. You got to catch them all. That's what he said, is you got to catch them all. You got to catch all the species in your local area and see what works. See which species perform really well, reliably. And something that he said that was really interesting to me is people will spend all this time looking for what's the best species for my area. And he said that the truth is the species that'll grow best in your area is already in your area. The idea is you have to go find it. You have to go explore. You really have to go catch them all. The second stage of that, obviously, evaluation, is evaluating, seeing which of those perform, which of those outperform the others, underperform. And then the third stage is curating. You've done all the experimentation, you've done the high diversity trials kind of in the laboratory, and as you're expanding, you're honing and you're dialing with focus. And that's one thing that I really admire. And kind of the next takeaway from his site is the focus and efficiency of his farm. He said something to the effect of, just because you have the ability to grow something doesn't mean you have the ability to produce it. And so what the idea here is like zone pushing. You see a lot of people wanting to zone push. Even myself, I get kind of carried away and wanting to grow some things that aren't quite in my growing zone. It's kind of a push, kind of a stretch. And for one-off things, if you're just doing it for the novelty, fantastic. But if you're trying to grow a business and reliably produce crops on zone pushing, or things that you can maybe get away with in your climate, hard to rely on that for your income. Now, to contrast the efficiency and the linear nature, because we'll talk about the linear efficiency and the batch management and the reduced diversity of his production systems, but he's also got the really high diversity areas. He's got the food forest, kind of for aesthetics and diversity, where he's got these really cool strategy. Florida, it's really sandy, free draining, so he's got these pits and mounds that he's created. Pits for organic material, bananas to feed on, an easy place to put really chunky organic matter that just feeds the soil, and then you're using the mounds to raise the trees up, because it's a really flood prone area, and so sometimes you want to lift trees up so they're not in danger of being flooded. That it's just more aesthetic, more diversity, and kind of moving away from the straight, rigid lines of production-focused agroforestry.
Original planting was in 2018, but none of the trees are the same ones. I've deleted, replaced, started over, either because I didn't like the fruit or because the hurricane didn't like the tree, and then I had to plant something else. So nothing in here is probably more than 4 years old at this point.
Do you like this format with like these quite large, more open, less like strict? Like, what are the pros and cons in your experience?
It's an aesthetic choice, and it also, to me, this gives me an opportunity to have a little more diversity. It's not so management oriented. This is more personal enjoyment oriented. The design here is kind of similar. I talked about putting things on mounds. The way that I set these up was I dug a pit and put basically a banana circle in the middle, and then I used the material out of the pit to make mounds for trees. So you'll see main trees up on mounds, you'll see a pit with bananas around it, and then it just kind of spread out from there. The biggest mistake that I made in here, which I see people make all the time, is not planting enough support species. I didn't put enough of these in the first place.
You hear that? That's the main mistake.
Not putting enough support species.
Plant more.
So if you go back to the old Jeff Lawton videos, they talk about like 7 stages of a food forest or whatever. And if you look at what he's doing, he's planting, I think it's like 7 to 10 support species per fruit tree. And I see almost nobody do that, including myself. I'm guilty of it too. This is my effort of coming back. So I've got eucalyptus, slabic, there's castor there, there's ice cream bean, there's lucena, there's interlobium, there's all kinds of stuff. Trying to create that dappled shade that makes this actually work.
More than you think you need. If you think it's too many, put more.
Yeah, and if you're curious to know whether your food forest is syntropic, to me the biggest answer is, does it provide its own cover? Does it do this? Does it actually cover the soil with its own material from its site, long term?
And one of the biggest, earliest lessons that he took away was that tree lines are so important. What I mean is planting trees in an individual line, not kind of staggering things. That's one of the big things that people question when they're first getting into agroforestry is, why are we planting everything in a straight, exact line? Why don't we stagger them? Why don't we kind of occupy the space a little bit more? And truthfully, it's all about management. This is something that Matt figured out early on, and then I figured it out, and a lot of other people kind of go through the same process and realize, man, it's so much harder to manage. And what I mean by that is, when you're placing the mulch down, having everything in a straight line, you can just throw the mulch down right there, and you know you're not going to crush any seedlings, you're not going to bury anything, and it's a really efficient way of covering all the soil that needs to be covered to reduce grass pressure and weeding. Whereas when you have things staggered, right, when you have trees staggered, you have to start tucking material in places. There's a lot more area to cover and making sure you're not smothering trees. It's just a lot more pain in the ass than if you just have a straight tree line. So that's one of his earliest learnings, rather than having wide beds where you've got trees kind of on all these edges and in the middle, single tree line. And then the next key unlock is batching your management for your grasses. So early on, he and Josh Anderson, I actually had the privilege of being with Josh Anderson and Matt Reese on Matt's farm when I was there. Josh is also a fantastic practitioner. Got to visit him in Ibiza. He's got a farm there. He's doing really well. And they've spent a lot of time together at Matt's farm. And one of the things they did early on was grass trials. They trialed a bunch of different grass types. I think they trialed Mombasa, vetiver, Bana grass. I think they landed on the Bana or the Napier grass in terms of what's easiest to cut super regularly and drop down to reduce the weeding, right? So you don't have to weed all the time. Basically, they were doing these trials. What can you cut the best? What's going to regrow best? Have the best organic matter? And doing these trials also showed them that having the ability to batch your management, which basically means on the edges of your tree lines, that's where you want consistent species, right? You don't want to have this huge mix, this huge diversity of species on your edges, which you're constantly going to be cutting with either a machete, probably a brush cutter. You want to have a consistent species so it's really easy and straightforward to manage, and you can batch the management. That's a high frequency activity. You're not going to be pruning trees as often as you're doing that. And so all the diversity, all the chaos, all the creativity, the artistry goes into the tree lines in your species arrangement. But on the edges, you want to be able to batch management, whether it's Bana grass, Mexican sunflower, in a colder climate, maybe willows, elderberries, whatever analogs you have for these fast rotation, herbaceous, maybe woody species, tropical grasses if you can get away with it, going along the edges of your tree line.
In terms of maintenance, if you have something that you can manage all of it quickly versus having it mixy the whole way through, it makes a big difference. The mixture can be in the tree lines, and that's where there's the artistry. But if you want to get things done, you need to have some of it kind of batchable work. You know, that's what makes scaling a system up tolerable.
And we'll see that same exact pattern through a lot of these different systems that we'll look at today. And so the last couple things that really inspired me about Matt's project is just his resilience. Despite really tough challenges in Florida, they're really prone to big hurricanes, droughts, flooding, and despite that, you know, he was talking about trees being just fully leveled, horizontal, sideways, or being ripped fully out of the ground, and continuing despite that, right? Continuing despite the challenges.
There's 2 trees here that got ripped completely out of the ground, so I've replaced them now. But imagine a tree just getting removed and going away, because the tree went away.
And that's just something that's really admirable, whether it's in agriculture or whether it's in another pursuit. Somebody that persists through challenges always has my respect. Final thing is just an interesting transition from consulting and installations into primarily the nursery and the farm. Producing grafted mangoes from his own collection, that's kind of the primary business at the moment, and the mangoes and the fruit production is a great bonus, but the primary earning has moved away from consulting and installations into nursery, which fantastic move, and I think there's lots of opportunity for other agroforestry practitioners to do similar things. Once you go through that first collection, gotta catch them all stage, refine your collection, evaluate, and then expand from there. So awesome work, Matt. Love his systems. If you're watching this, appreciate you, man.
To be honest, I'm jealous of you getting to go into Brazil because you're getting to see things that are further along than this. I've never gotten to go to a system that was older than mine, and I really want to.
Do you want to come to Brazil?
I do. I tried to go a couple years ago when COVID canceled all my flights.
In a month. Go on.
Find me someone to take care of the nursery.
Yeah. Oh, he's right here.
I'm going back to Spain, dude.
By the way, if you're planning your own system and you want my actual design module template, plus free species matrix that I actually use for projects with clients, you can download both of those here. This is the module design template, and this is the species matrix. Both of these together, they cover 4 different climate types and kind of give you the backbone for how to design your system. Link is below. They're free. Check them out.
Tree range chickens, so the chicken and the eggs. How the agroforestry links into it all is there's a number of different ways of how it serves the enterprises. One of the main ones is shade. Broiler caravans like the popularised by Joel Salatin, in our climate, it's just too hot for the chickens. They would cook if they were out in the sun. They're just all just cark it because unfortunately, these chickens are they're bred for, they are maintained in air-conditioned 23 degrees all the time. So, when we're taking them into an environment they're not adapted for, we need to make certain considerations for that. You can see now they're kind of ranging around and moving around in their pen. If this was out in the full sun right now, they would just be concentrated in their caravan, and then they would only go out for the first hour of the morning and then the last hour in the evening. That means they're spending more time outside, so they're kind of happier chickens, but also they're foraging more from what they can find around rather than just eating their grain supplement.
Misty Creek. This is in Australia, Northern Rivers area, where they're doing really cool agroforestry with meat and laying chickens, cattle, and vegetables. Super cool operation, a global reference point, especially for people who are interested in incorporating animals into their farm. And one of the biggest takeaways from me here was that shade is one of the biggest assets that they're getting from the agroforestry, especially in these really challenging Australia conditions. They're doing pastured chickens in these big caravans. They need to be adapted for really hot days, hot nights, and high rainfall. And so the way they're doing this and adapting is A, with the agroforestry, tree lines at 10 to 12 meters, getting lots of shade, extra forage, extra insects biology. And then beyond the caravan, they've got the electric poultry netting, which they're moving with the caravan to allow the chickens to roam outside and not just be in the caravan all day. And what they're aiming to do here is just give the chickens a super high quality of life. It's a much more complete ecosystem, and that's why they call their chickens tree range. So beyond free range, but tree range, going back to their origins as jungle birds.
What we've done here is it's more or less a similar thing that pastured chickens are doing all over the world, but adapted to our subtropical climate. So what's different about that is we're getting very hot temperatures, including hot nights, which is really important for animals. A lot of rain. We've had years we've had over 3 meters. It does flood here and we can expect regular floods. There's something to do with the psyche of the animal as well. It lives outside, it ranges around. We believe this is the best for the life of the chicken, getting to range around. Just behind me here we've got this barna grass, and you can see that the chickens love ranging around it because it's nice and shady for them.
One of the other operations that they're doing is super cool is they're doing Brussels sprouts as a vegetable crop in between their alleys, in between their tree lines. And they're doing it in a very low input, low management kind of way where they're growing a cover crop, they're cutting that cover crop down in between the alleys, mounding all that material in the middle, and then using that as the edge to plant their Brussels sprouts. And then the barna grass that they have along the edges of the tree lines, that can get cut regularly to mulch the outsides of the Brussels sprout, which grow. They feed on that big mulch mound in the middle of the alley. It's a really effective way of doing very low, basically no weeding for your vegetables, which that's kind of one of the most time-consuming things that you're paying for is weeding. So when you don't have to do that, you're not paying for inputs, you're building fertility because you're moving the animals through, you're putting more carbon in the soil, you're producing a crop, and you're also getting the benefit of improving your land through the process. It's a really cool win-win system for the animals, the land, and the farm.
It's been a very productive system as well. So we grew 3 rows of Brussels sprouts. We got 300 kilos of Brussels sprouts from that with, no inputs. So more or less our costs are the planting, cutting the biomass a couple of times, and then harvesting.
Yeah, and those are just going straight to market.
Yeah, they go into the farmers markets as well, and also at the farmers markets.
Yeah, maybe that sounds like a lot of work, a lot of steps, but then when you realize, like, well, you're not irrigating, you're not having to put all these inputs and like all this stuff that you don't have to
weed.
do.
Like weeding is a huge cost. Yeah, so that's a major one. And also, we talk about all this stuff, and it makes sense in terms of growing the crop, but also you're improving the soil so much as well, and it's almost like just a forgotten thing. It still happens, and it's still super valuable, but it makes sense without it, which is great. So then it's just like just your bonus. I think it adds a lot more purpose to our animals, like being able to, not just think about growing beef or growing chicken, but also how I can use those animals that are living their best life and living their natural life, but also help them to, just grow something else. We don't have a huge farm here, so it's all about taking advantage of all the synergies that we can.
Yeah. What is the size of the farm here?
It's 28 acres.
Yeah. And how much of that is kind of planted into agroforestry systems?
Pretty close, probably about 15 to 20. Yeah, pretty much all the bits that kind of make sense. Yeah, yeah.
Super inspirational, and it's really clear that they've done a lot of thinking ahead and planning for the business model. What Tom was saying, a lot of the costs actually come in post-harvest, and so one of the key things he was saying was that it's not about having a super cool agroforestry system. It's about having a functional farm that operates well. And so the way that they're doing that is they've got a really great diverse offering for their market, which in that area that they're in, Northern Rivers of Australia, they've got a really strong farmers market culture. They said that they could go to a farmers market 6 days of the week. Now they don't do that. They go to 3 different farmers markets per week where they're selling their chickens, eggs, Brussels sprouts, and they're doing really well for themselves. Having a diverse offering so you can cross-sell different items. You're not just there to sell chickens, you're not just there to sell eggs, but you can sell the vegetables as well because, well, you can't buy chickens without Brussels sprouts. So all in all, they're doing fantastic work, and I think one of the coolest takeaways is now that they've spent so many years establishing systems on their farm, at the very end, this is kind of a classic thing of how to do it, but once you go through all the trial and error to fill your farm up, by the end you get really good at it, but you have no more space. And that's one thing that Tom was saying was that by the end, he's now really nailed the installation process, so he's not having to weed the tree lines anymore, especially at the young age. And the way he's doing that is with and it's the common pattern that we see in all these really successful systems, is a high diversity and a high density of early succession species. That's the key. High density and high diversity of early succession species. So he's got things like castor oil, castorina for longer term, wild tobacco, bananas, mulberries, cassava, sun hemp as an early cover crop, pigeon pea, guavas, long-term red cedar, golden rain tree. That's kind of the species mix that they're seeing lots of success with. But the thing is, it's super dense. Tom even talked about how they're putting mulberries in as cuttings. Not that every single one is going to go, but they're putting them in every single meter on the new tree lines, expecting that long-term, that's going to be one of the main trees there. But in the short term, he's got these really fast succession species, the sun hemp, the castor oil, the tobacco, and that's creating shade, shelter, and it's avoiding the need to do a bunch of weeding in the tree line to help establish your long-term trees.
What does work really well. And yeah, unfortunately, we're pretty much out of space now to plant any more. It's like, I've just figured it out. Like, this is perfect. Everything's grown well. There's no weeding. Every succession's taken care of. It has all of the plants already that I want for my animals. So I guess that's just the benefit of experience and having a clear plan. And sometimes you need to go through all of these learning experiences to get to that point. So our first succession in this row was sun hemp and cowpea. We can just see a little remnant of that now. So that's come and gone. We've cut that. So now we're starting to get the next succession where we have the castor oil as our emergent, we have pigeon pea, and we have cassava. So, none of this is groundbreaking. These are all species that everyone's using before, but yes, just having these in a very, very high density means that this all functions like a forest, like it's going through the stages of succession like a forest, and we haven't had to do any weeding, which is great. We haven't had this grass encroaching on the bed, even though I didn't remove the grass rhizomes, which was a big risk. I thought, oh geez, I thought I'm going to try to not do it because it's a lot of work and it's back-breaking work. I'm going to try to not do it and hopefully it'll work. But yeah, with this like really high density of plants, it worked perfectly.
The great thing about these systems is that they're super flexible, right? With the agroforestry lines at 10 to 12 meters, you can run your chickens, you can run your cattle, you can run the vegetables. The idea is that it's a really flexible system and you can tailor it to what you need, but the cool thing is that it's planned from the start to be that way. He's been really thoughtful about the size of the caravans, the length of the lines for moving animals, and how infrequently you want to actually turn the caravan, so making really long lines, how to establish new systems where you're not even having to pick through and take all the grass nodes out. That's one thing that he was saying about establishing these new lines, is that he's just doing a deep rip and a single cultivator, and he's not picking all the rhizomes out from the kikuyu, from the grass. He's literally just deep ripping, cultivate, and plant the seeds, and not worrying about taking all the grass pieces out. And it's still working really well to establish tree lines without extra weeding. That's like the holy grail. And so lots of lessons we can learn from what Tom is doing, whether it's on the business side of things or whether it's just on the establishment of systems. Beautiful work. If you're seeing this, Tom, super cool visiting the farm.
To feed to the pigs.
Yeah, pig
Because
feed.
all this is pig food.
All this is pig feed. They will eat the nacerero.
We made it to the pig-based Syntropic agroforestry systems. We've got 8-meter tree lines and space for pigs in between. They've got this metal sled netting around it that they can rotate the pigs. Every tree, every plant in these tree lines is geared to be pig food. It's all pig food. And so they're seeing how can we regenerate the land with the agroforestry and produce a high protein food for humans, create happy pigs, happy ecosystem. This is in Costa Rica at Finca Nueva. Now this is a project that one of my friends, Scott Gallant and Sam Kenworthy at Porvenir Design of Costa Rica, they've been designing and working with the landowners here to develop a whole series of really cool systems. They've developed cacao systems, they've developed really cool fruit systems, but the pig system is the one that I want to focus on because it's just really interesting and thought-provoking on how to incorporate animals really intelligently into systems with good planning.
That's not a cultural practice we have here. We usually see pig systems and we just see a pretty destroyed ecosystem. That's not going to happen. Otherwise, I'm fired. Right.
Well, otherwise they're fine.
Otherwise, they're fired. Get the.
I mean,
pigs
this
out.
is the experiment here. Can we figure out how to produce this protein in a way that's kind to the animals for every day until their last moment, and kind to the ecosystem, and we're either going to be able to do it or not, and that's what our experimentation is here.
These guys are getting close to being ready to harvest.
To feed to the pigs.
Yeah, pig
Because
feed.
all this is pig food.
All this is pig feed. They will eat the nacerero. We have some citrus in here. They'll eat the citrus. They'll eat these trunks. They'll eat the flowers of these. We're going to have to chop it up for them.
And they're doing that right now. They're chopping some
Yeah.
foliage.
Buen ejemplo. We have noni, which is, not everyone likes noni. That's okay. But we have noni that's already starting to produce. The breadfruit's doing really well. We have ground covers in here that are for animals. This is what's called a lechoso. And so it really helps for lactating mammals. And what we hope will happen here is that once these systems are a little further along, but it won't take that much. We need to do one more replant. There's some gaps in here, yada, yada, yada. But I'm hoping the pigs will be able to go right into these rows. Wow. They'll eat this down. They'll eat the mombasa down. They'll eat the weeds down. Okay, to do that, what will be required is moving them quickly. Like we won't be able to leave them in here. So that's what we're really going to be playing
Notice
with.
the latex. So I know this is yerba lechera.
Yeah, lechoso.
Right. So this is if you had the abuelas come through, they would go, oh, this is for women who are having difficulty producing breast milk. And so there would be teas of this made for those women. And you know, there's a speculation that this is an example of what herbalists refer to as the doctrine of signatures. That plants have a signature of what they are good for. And here, and this is a euphorb, so you think it's poisonous. It's not poisonous. And whenever any piece of this, if you tear it, you see this latex, this milk produced. And the idea is that, well, maybe this is good for milk production. And to show you that it's not a placebo effect, veterinarians use it, and it helps. So this is actually good for milk production, and it grows like crazy in this ecosystem.
So happy. So this is our climax low strata. So underneath all of these things, it's just planted in key areas. We put it at the base of every breadfruit and every jackfruit just so we know where it is. We'll keep replanting it, we'll spread it. And so basically in between these Mombasa lines, the whole ground cover it might take a while. There's a lot of square meters here will be covered in this plant.
So a little bit of context and history for this project is that they previously had pigs before on the land, but there's a problem. The way they were managing the pigs, well, they weren't really managing that well, and so that created kind of like a mono-type ecosystem. It was all homogeneous, it was all the same, and kind of becoming more degraded. Basically, the idea is they had full access to a whole area of land inside of an enclosure. And so then the Savory team came out to the land and they taught about holistic management. And they kind of pointed out, hey, you're not managing the pigs, they're managing themselves. And so when you give the management up to the pigs, or when you give the management up to any animal, they're going to kind of tear everything up and manage things as they please. And so the whole idea behind holistic management, or at least the way I understand it, it can be summed up in this really easy phrase: intermittent and patchy disturbance. Intermittent and patchy disturbance is essentially this idea that you're getting a long recovery time before you're coming back to the same piece of land, which means it's intermittent. It's on and then it's off for a long time. And then patchy is its patchworks, right? It's a patchwork of disturbances, not a whole area. Patchwork here and then move, recovers, right? And so that's kind of exactly how I'm treating the ducks on the farm here. It's months before they ever return to the same area, but when they're there, it's a high disturbance, it's a high density mob of ducks doing their damage, eating things, pooping, disturbing the land, and then they move and then the land recovers with more fertility and a good recovery time before the ducks are returning to the land. And the same thing would be true here for the pigs, or whether it's cattle, sheep, goats, whatever animal you have, you can manage them holistically. I think Alan Savory was originally doing research on elephants in Africa.
Let's be honest, a little confessional here. We had pigs before. We didn't do it right.
What did that look like?
Their wallows were very destructive. So they were in this. They were actually right across the road where Terry is, and we had pigs, and we let them do what pigs do, which is they're terrorists for an ecosystem. They just tore everything apart, and it was like they were open pastured. And I remember the Savory team came here for an international gathering. And the Savory folks said, you know, by all means have livestock in the ecosystem. That's part of what holistic management is all about. But you're not managing. They're managing. You're surrendering it to them. And if you give it over to the pigs, they'll tear everything apart. So now we're not doing it that way. So again, we've made lots of mistakes. We're very humble. We'll probably make lots more mistakes. But that's what we're all about here.
Two more, that's it.
No. One more.
One more.
So in short, the idea is heavy disturbance and then long recovery. And so the way that they're applying this with the pigs is they've designed this entire agroforestry system with the pigs and this custom mobile pig pen in mind. We've actually got two kinds of netting. They've got the electric poultry netting, and they've got 2-strand electric hot wire down at the pig level. And the idea is that they're rotated down these alleys. And the tree lines are excluded. The tree lines are not included as part of the fencing, so the pigs are literally moving in between the tree lines through the alleys. But I think the thing that's most impressive, and I want to kind of take away from this, is that it was designed for pigs from the start. This whole system was designed for pigs years ago, and they finally have just begun to incorporate them, but the system wasn't designed for fruit production and then transitioned over to pigs. No, from the start, it was designed with pigs in mind, so they were putting edible fruits for the pigs, they were putting health boosters, they're putting biomass, fodder crops for the pigs from the start. Things like breadfruit, jackfruit, lechoso, they've got noni fruit, bananas, Mombasa grass, and katuk. All these things are specifically for the pigs. And that's the thing that I want to impress on you. If there's one day that, maybe I'll include animals into the system, design it that way from the start. Design it that way so that you're not trying to cram animals into a system that wasn't really designed for them in the first place. It makes your life way easier in the future if you do it from the start. So figure out what kind of animals you want, how you want to move them around, how you want to rotate them, and build your system based on that foundation.
Porky and Petunia. Petunia's pregnant. This is our pig tractor. Collects water off of here. Down, they have their little nipples. Everything's welded on. Everything's metal, strong, where the pigs are going to touch, because otherwise they will rip it apart. We've immediately noticed that, like, this little mesh division, which is a little bit thinner than these ones, they've already started doing some damage to it. We had them separate for a while when they were getting settled in here. And this is on skates. We can pull this with the ATV, or the farm crew can come here and move it. And so this is what we'll be playing with to see how often we have to move it, how destructive it is. And these guys they're hot right now. This is the hottest it gets here, like temperature wise. Usually it's much rainier, cloudier, so a little bit cooler. Took a while to look for the breed that we were really interested in. This is Casco de Mula, so much more like a Criollo breed of pigs. And soon-ish, Petunia will get moved over to the infrastructure for breeding. She'll be placed there. She'll get to hang out in a deep litter system. We'll really fill it up with all sorts of straw and mulch and make a comfortable space for her to give birth. She'll be in there for about 3 months and she'll still have access to the outside, and then she'll come back and join the herd here that's going to grow soon.
And one of the things that you're paying attention to really closely when you're managing animals in a landscape like this is not to overdo the disturbance. How to make sure you're getting enough disturbance but not too much, how to have a good recovery window before the animals are coming back, noticing any transitions in the vegetation type and the ground cover that's returning, like what's the land's response to those animals. It's one thing that I'm seeing here with the ducks. After they pass through, way less grass on the recovery and way more forbs. To me, that's a great sign. The soil conditions improving, we're getting more diversity in the pasture. Fantastic. But again, that changes with the time of year. The recovery depends on, is it spring, autumn, winter, summer, and so it's something that you're constantly going to be learning and adjusting and figuring out as you go. But you want to be paying attention to that vegetation recovery, the stock unit density, and just the general changes in vegetation. It's really cool though. Here I can see the increased fertility levels already being expressed in the bananas and the fruit trees. Everything's doing way better with the incorporation of the ducks.
Part of my thinking is to make it, on the one hand, economically viable, so that I have a functioning business, so whoever comes here will want to keep that on.
So this was your first paddock you've ever done 2 years ago?
2 and a bit years now, yeah. I'm Simon. This is my first agroforestry planting. Learned in Brazil for a few months, came back here, wanted to make it viable commercially, so on a big enough scale and with good enough efficiency, but still respecting all the ecology of agroforestry.
We're jumping back to Australia. This is a site that I didn't even plan to go to. I didn't even know it existed, but I just happened to go there by chance. And this was to meet Simon at Macakaco Agroforestry. Lots of inspiration from the system. It's one of the best that I've ever seen. That's why it's in this top 10 list. And the things that he's doing that are really impressive are the scale, the focus, and just the efficiency. He's spending 2 days on site managing these really impressive systems, doing this all pretty much by himself on leased land.
Knowing that you might only be doing it for 5 years and then you have to give it up doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it, I think. So that's
Respect.
yeah, because I mean you're gonna give it up eventually anyway, right? So
We all leave this earth with nothing,
exactly. So it's a good learning in that. It doesn't necessarily make it easier, but probably good learnings aren't necessarily easy. But then also practically trying to figure out ways for me to stay here longer than 5 years. And if the owners stay on the property for longer than 5 years, we can extend. And other than that, I either have to try to buy it or find someone to buy it who wants to keep me here. Part of my thinking is to make it, on the one hand, economically viable, so that I have a functioning business, so whoever comes here will want to keep that on, just purely for financial reasons. And then the other is to make it sort of beautiful and inspiring, so that whoever comes here wants to keep it on as well. So yeah, I've got a few years still to try to find, essentially I think of it as like an impact investor. Someone who would want to buy the property and maintain the business, as a functioning business, but also as something that they are passionate about and want to see continue. Yeah.
Beautiful. And the whole thing that he's doing is succession-based cropping, using successional agroforestry or syntropic practices that he also learned by going to Brazil. And I don't want to downplay how important that is. If you really want to learn, go practice with the practitioners, go learn with the black belts, go to Brazil. And so what he's doing is he's cropping taro, cassava, and that's transitioning into things like dragon fruit, passion fruit, bananas. It's quite literally cropping with ecological succession. And long term, he's got his rainforest trees in there, whether for biodiversity, ecological value, or timber. And he's using all the classic support species for this climate. Tithonia or Mexican sunflower, bonnegrass, pigeon pea, eucalyptus. And all of those are helping to do two things. One, increase the fertility, and B, reduce the weeding. You can see how many tree lines he has, how much acreage. I think it's about 2 hectares at the moment, or when I filmed this. And imagine how much hand weeding that would be if he didn't have those support species. Staying on top of the management with the brush cutter, which is his tool of choice to brush cut with the bonnegrass on the edges, reduces how much he has to actually do any hand weeding at all. He's cutting the biomass, putting it down, and it's suppressing the rest, building fertility, and keeping the tree lines covered.
This here, I cut with a brush cutter with the blade. It's really nice work actually when you get into the flow of it, just cutting and pushing it across. And you can see it gives me a lot of mulch, and I find this is going to recover within 5 to 6 weeks. At this time of year I'll be cutting it again. That was cut about 10 days ago, and that's the recovery already. And I always find that when I cutting and mulching again, I'm always cutting the grass onto mulch that's still there, so the mulch hasn't quite finished breaking down by the time I cover it again. And then will eventually be getting mulch from the pigeon peas, and then later on from the bananas to go on top of that too. I think I'd probably be better at giving that advice in a few years, but from
I love the honesty, hey.
At the moment I'd say, yeah, probably you have to get training. I think training is the most important thing. So you need agroforestry training, and that's easier to get. You can do courses, you can go round to other people's places, you can go to Brazil, you can even really just like Instagram and YouTube and stuff you can learn a lot from. But then I think what people don't do is get the conventional agricultural training, and also just the knowledge and the wisdom from old successful farmers, and they might be using chemicals and doing things in a way that you don't want to do, and they might not even see anything wrong with that, but they probably, if they've been doing it for up to 50 years and they're making money, particularly if they're making money from it, and even if they're just still doing it, they'll have a lot of knowledge, and from different people you can learn different things about processes and how to do things and how to make things work. And yeah, I think that's the most important, is getting the right training with, at a number of different farms with people that do things well, and then trying to put it all together in a way that works.
Now, Simon and I did a whole deep dive on how he runs the farm profitably. I think there's a video in the free community, the Food Forest family. I'll put the link below for that. But we talk about the leasing model, how he's basically on a 10% revenue share, and that allows him to use the land, use the infrastructure, and able to maintain his business. It's just a super coincidence that I got to meet him, and I was so impressed that he was basically doing all of this on a one-man operation, essentially on 2 days a week. It highlights how important the basics are. Just because you think you understand the theory doesn't mean that it's easy to do. He's done a really great job at laying out and establishing his biomass lines, doing things really precisely. He's got a lot of efficiency built into the system now, but that doesn't mean that it's easy. Just to understand it or to see it is different than to actually practice it. That's something that I'm always trying to improve on here at the farm. It's not even as big as Simon's place, and I'm still trying to play catch up in some areas that didn't establish as well. Some are okay, but some areas I didn't have the discipline. When you have the basics nailed, it makes everything so much easier. So that's the one thing to take away from here, is this ruthless focus on getting good establishment of your support species. Super impressive. Simon, if you're seeing this, you're awesome, man.
I don't think farmer is a good word. I think is stewards of the land. But when you are steward of the land, you're taking care of so many different aspects. It's not just about agriculture. It's not just about society. It's not just about building tools. It's not just about architecture. It's about everything. So it's not like, I am a farmer and I have to produce. No, you have to produce something good for yourself and for the society and for the ecosystems. What's the best thing you can do? Well, you choose it.
This is in northern Italy with Matteo Mazzola. One of the biggest takeaways that I got from Matteo was that he sees farming as more of a systemic thing than just production. You're not just producing something for people, but you have to produce something good for the ecosystem as well. But he's thinking about how do you transform farms into places that people enjoy being, where people like to be, where people's needs are being taken care of. Makes you want to be on the farm, makes you want to live there and spend time there. Especially Italy has seen a huge amount of people leaving farmland. I think over the last 20 years, 1.3 million people have left rural farms in Italy, and it's resulting in the abandonment of these rural areas, right? The abandonment of land either being bought up by big companies or people just fully abandoning the land, or it's left to be unmanaged. And so one of Matteo's big drivers is, how do you make farming appealing? How do you make it more sexy and people coming back to the land?
If you just think from culturally, you're there under the sun, cutting the hay, no? And after a few hours, you start to feel like, oh, I need some sugar, I need some energy. Oh, you just planted your supermarket very close to where you're working, and if you diffuse this in the whole farm, it changes the way you live the landscape.
It changes your relationship with the farm.
Yeah, it's not just work, it's living, because if there is food, if there is beauty, if there is sense, then it's not just working. So the idea is also to move from farms as factories to places where people like to live. Otherwise, we never will have enough people to repopulate. Italy lost, since the 80s, I think, 3 million of farmers. Who's managing the land? Machinery? Big companies, but still, big companies will never manage this type of landscape. So it means it will be reforested, which is beautiful, but at the same time, from biodiversity point of view, cultural point of view, tourism, a forest is beautiful, but it's not the only element that you should have in the landscape.
Finding a way to inspire people, especially young people, to get back onto the land. And I think that's part of what Syntropic agroforestry has this opportunity for. And so when we see people like Matteo putting this into practice, demonstrating these different kinds of systems, we did a video and we explored 13 of these different agroforestry systems. We're not going to look at all of them in this video right here, but the premise is that he's showing all these different models of ways you can make money with a farm, what they're doing successfully, what's working, what's not, and how they keep testing and showing that it's a beautiful quality of life to live on a farm and do this work regeneratively.
For us, it was very important to prove to society that you can live with agriculture first, economically speaking, financially speaking, and second, that organic, simplifying to organic, not speaking even about agroecology or permaculture or syntropy and so on, but with organic food production, you can feed the world and do a good living as a farmer. So I think this was one of the main objectives. But then there are so many objectives stacking and interweaving one with the other.
And one of the things that I really admired about his outlook is that he's not attached to a particular system or a particular dogma. He's not, I'm just Syntropic, or I'm just Keyline, or I'm just holistic management, but he takes pieces of what's useful and applies them to his own context. Because copying and pasting is never the solution. It's never this. That's not why I provide even templates and things. It's hard to do that sometimes because it's not meant to be a copy and paste. It's meant to get the ball rolling for you, inspire some ideas. But you know, I spoke to somebody who tried to copy and paste one of the designs that I was sharing at one stage, and they showed me, and they just said, "Look, I've just basically copied and pasted all this and filled in with my species." And I said, "And this isn't useful for you at all because the whole context was different than what you were copying from." And so, the idea is, you don't need to be dogmatic. You don't need to just follow Syntropic agroforestry. Or I had somebody else recently in the community saying, "Oh, but I'm worried it's not Syntropic because X, Y, Z." And you don't have to worry about, is it Syntropic? Are you planting trees? Are you managing the land well? And that's one thing that Matteo really said is, you know, plant trees, manage animals, be connected with the land. That's what he's aiming to do, and create systems that are intelligent. And so that was one of the big pieces of wisdom that really struck me from the conversations with Matteo. And simplicity. And this is something we'll see as a pattern in other sites that I really appreciate and admire, but the really simple systems of just having 3 distinct layers: a support emergent canopy, a medium or a high strata productive canopy, and then a low strata. Apples sitting underneath Paulownia for biomass and shade and shelter, which were reducing the hail damage. Hail in this part of Italy, a huge threat, solves that. Solves the really intense sun. Solves the need for biomass, getting extra fodder from them for the animals. And then the understory, underneath the apples, he's got comfrey. Weed suppression, extra fertility, pulling up nutrients, keeping the ground covered and soil cool. And then in between the alleys of the apples, growing vegetables. And you can see that here. There's lettuce or there's tomatoes in between your alleys of apples, Polonia, and comfrey.
Just as we are selling this for €3 a kilo, already these lines, I should make the calculation again, but already these lines, they make lots of money and not using any space or very little space. We wanted to have them a little bit more spaced than commercial.
Because this is
system.
1.5?
This is 1.5, yeah.
Yeah.
Normally commercials, they get to 60, okay?
Yeah.
But you know, then the management. So we don't really treat them. It's just like, you know, a crop that you prune, you harvest. If you want, you can treat it a couple of times. And then it's got fair irrigation. And the protection of the Polonia is beautiful because you see during summertime the health of the leaves. I mean, this has been a quite tough springtime with lots of rain, and it was still beautiful. And during summertime, you will see the trees that are outside from the Polonias. You'll see the leaves how degraded they
suffer.
They suffer.
Yeah.
And these one are super fine. And also, when the first frosts come, they don't shed the leaves. They keep them for 1 month later, because the Polonias, being that they have lots of sugars,
In autumn, they keep things protected.
crazy. It's just like they lose the leaves here now in January. But the other important thing is that I started this system with thinking, okay, silvopasture system, vase, fruit trees with the vase shape. But then I realized it's not really compatible. Because either you have small animals, but then to put the nets, you have to increase the height of the vase. But once you increase the height, it's more difficult to harvest. And so I want to test this because just imagine to have silvopastoral systems like this. We have your cows, you have your chickens, you have your rabbits, you have whatever you want to raise, and then you have your apples. But apples that will never grow inside the system. So you keep the two systems separated. The animals, because you put the nets or the wire, they will not go there and eat them. Actually, what you can do, you can maybe make them more espalier if you don't want to use too much space, 3D space.
Yeah.
But I think this has got huge potential.
But on a more practical level, his systems were all designed for animal integration. He sees animal grazing as a huge part of managing the land, especially steeper land, especially it's a tradition in Italy. And so animals playing a huge role in cutting grass and making that viable economically, because, you know, a farmer, who's going to pay for somebody to cut grass and mulch trees? Whereas when you can cut and carry fodder for sheep, or when you can incorporate chickens into your system, which he did a beautiful job of that, and kind of opened my eyes, because previously I thought chickens were just kind of a destructive creature in agroforestry systems. I hadn't seen them integrated really well into the tree lines. Now, sometimes you'll see chickens in the alleys. It works. It's great. But to see chickens incorporated with the tree lines, it was just such a different dynamic. And he was explaining that, you know, a lot of people, and I had previously seen this myself, that chickens are kind of a destructive creature. Yes, they're from the forest, but they'll dig up the mulch, they'll scratch the soil, they'll pull trees out. And so I'm thinking, how do you incorporate chickens successfully into the tree lines without them being destructive and damaging? And he's saying that, you know, after year 3 or 4 of the tree lines being established, the chickens are actually providing a great service, because right around the collar of the tree, right where the soil level is, where it kind of transitions from above ground to below ground, that point is where it's a huge vector for disease and pressure and insects. And so insects and diseases will sit right there, and that's what the chickens are disturbing. They're kind of opening and aerating and oxidizing the soil there and bringing health to the tree. It would be a perverse incentive for them to actually be destructive to the forest. That's their environment. And so they're trying to keep trees healthy, and the way they're doing that is protecting the trees at the collar, getting rid of the pest, the pressure, opening the soil, aerating things.
Chickens for me is a fantastic element to manage overgrowth on the tree lines when it needs to be trampled down.
Yeah.
You can't
You're putting them through the tree lines even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just,
So yeah, that's one thing that's you don't see it super often with syntropic systems incorporating animals or chickens, especially in the tree lines, because usually if you do, any seedlings that are coming up, squished, but you're using it to kind of reduce the spontaneous growth, like bring the grasses down that are maybe going to oxidize, put it in contact with the soil. Was there a stage where you wanted to exclude chickens from this area, like when it was establishing? Or
beginning.
Yeah.
They would damage maybe the young plants, as you're saying. So once the plants are grown, they use them. I mean, they add so many nutrients to the system. And I always look at an element, being a plant or animal or whatever. What is its or what are the functions of these elements in nature?
Mm.
Where is the chicken coming from?
Well, it's a
Coming
jungle
from
bird. It's a jungle
So
bird.
why is a jungle bird? Because the jungle has got abundance. There are insects. There are an accumulation of what they need, and so okay, perfect. They will take care of insects. They will bring super concentrated fertilizer. They will bring so many amazing effects on the system. They will oxygenize. This is the most important thing, as many people that have chickens. First thing they do when they come here, they come and they expose the color of the trees to the sun, because most of the dormant insects, they will go here. So they go there, they remove some organic matter in soil, so you have more sun and oxygen entering. So no Phytophthora, no problems on the color, no fungal problem on the color. The color is a critical point between two different worlds. Yeah, and we don't give much attention to how the color is managed, but most of or many tree disease, they start from there. And so to have an animal that needs that the forest is healthy, just like the earthworm, it creates the good conditions in the soil in order to have more biomass and microorganisms to eat. Chickens wants to have the forest, so if there is a predator that moves them in the system, so they will not degenerate the system, then they will provide to the system all those elements and services needed to maintain or increase the quality of the system itself.
And just keeping really simple systems. It doesn't need to be this crazy, hectic, diverse thing. And that's one of the things that they're actually doing this year on the farm, is taking some of the earliest experimental learning systems that they planted, which were really diverse, super chaotic and hectic, and now they're tearing those systems down and recreating new, more elegant, more simple, focused systems. And that's something that I admire so much as I get further into this field is, yes, go crazy, go diverse, but understand that the aim, if you're doing things at a certain scale, will eventually be to focus, and then you'll go back to your early areas. And I'm looking at my earliest areas here thinking, oh, there's maybe 5 years left, 10 years until I rip the whole thing down and start over. But the idea is you're going to keep iterating with more and more focus and certainty and understanding of these systems. So don't be afraid, don't be so committed, treating trees like they're permanent. They're not a museum. That's one of Ernst's old sayings. Hey, if you'd like help applying this to your own land, I do one-on-one blueprint sessions where we can map out the layout, planting sequence, species mix for your exact climate and land. Click the link below, answer a few questions about your property, and you can see times to book a blueprint call. Back to the video.
I need so badly to have shrubs everywhere or aromatic plants. We started wrong. Here, the complexity, we already pruned the eucalyptus. That one is an old one. It's a part of the mistake. So you see a new poplar because we want more. We don't have enough.
Site number 6, Ernst has consulted. Actually, Ernst has consulted a lot of these different projects. He's actually in this list. So he's going to be the last site that we go look at. But number 6 is in Portugal. This was at the ketchup factory in Golega, which is basically a family-run company, and they're just super eager to experiment. They've got about 2 hectares of productive syntropic agroforestry. They've been consulting with Ernst on this project for about the last 6 years, I think. In summer, it gets brutal. It gets to like almost 45 degrees Celsius in the heat of summer. But the great thing is with this dynamic, with these agroforestry systems, that's the time when they have maximal shade. They have the emergence, the eucalyptus and the poplar. Maximum shade in that hottest time of year really helps reduce the stress on the fruit trees. And so the moment that I was there was spring. Everything was super open. There was lots of sunlight coming in, but you can imagine in summer fully how it's entirely different, closed canopy, not so open, not so sunny. And so these systems are so dynamic, and I'd love to revisit this site again in the peak of summer.
It's very difficult to show people because they don't see the start point, the starting point.
What is the normal soil? Is it?
It was yellow and less than 1% of organic matter here. And you see now it's completely different. Response to the pruning.
In 3 months, how much of this canopy is closed?
On August you will have a lot of shade.
Okay, which is perfect.
Which is perfect for this climate.
Okay.
So imagine now it's very good to have the sun entering and the temperature increasing. In August we have some weeks we have 40-45 degrees Celsius. So, and we plant for the factory. So our business is food industry. We produce seasonings, a lot of hot sauces, also mayonnaise, ketchup, mustard, and the hot peppers varieties we plant on the interrow. It's an annual, so our decision now will be 1 year more hot peppers, next year aromatic plants on the interrow. We always leave one without nothing, so we can manage everything.
Yeah.
Okay, so this year, for example, there we had Carolina Reaper on that interrow last year.
Okay.
For the factory. This year we'll
Dangerous.
put lemongrass, a perennial, and we will leave the lemongrass. Here we will put I made one mistake. Here we will put spearmint and more open field lemongrass.
And you'll just put it in a single row?
Yeah.
And leaving...
Yeah. Leaving for the, how do you say in English? We work a lot with the BCS.
The walk behind.
Yes, with the cutting bar. So we pass the cutting bar on the sides and we put a central line of plantations with, you imagine, 3 lines of lemongrass. Yeah.
When you pass the BCS, how are you managing the organic material afterwards? Does it also have a raking mechanism, or is that by hand?
It's by hand here, and if you have something on the middle, if you go for a field with a little bit more spacing, you pass with a tractor, with a raking device, and you put it. Yeah.
Would that be your perfect world? A little bit more spacing and just more mechanization.
For me, you see here, for example, and the soil, underneath these ones, it handles the water much more time, the humidity. It's a shelter for insects, all those things.
And the irrigation, is it just on the fruit trees or is it on the whole line?
It's all line, but every meter, I think.
Okay.
And so essentially the farm manager, Joao, he spent the day walking us around, showing us the project. And he's a food scientist. That's the cool part. Joao is a food scientist, not a farmer, but he's still doing a really great job at understanding and learning and managing these 2 hectares. And one of the things that I appreciated the most about this project, and kind of the defining things for me, is that it was great because it was systemized and they had very clear production goals. That's super important, is to define your goals early and build a system that actually reflects that and doesn't just have you managing support species for these kind of unique, weird fruits that are interesting because they're unique, but then you don't have the production because you've gone to all these rare, weird things. No, there's actually production goals. Things are spaced pretty much at commercial density with additional support species to manage. It's beautiful. They had entire lines for plums, apples, figs, avocados, lemons, mulberries, peppers in the alleys. They also had Vita Meritate, which is basically growing grapes on trees. They had grapes being trained up the willow trees, which was a really cool thing to see. And then they even have a new system that they're in the middle of designing, which is an almond system, which is going to actually be mirroring at conventional spacing. So they're going to be placing the almonds at exactly conventional spacing, but with the integration of other emergent and lower strata support species. And so one of the interesting things that they found at the site was that as they've been doing the consulting with Ernst, they tried to simplify his designs. They tried to remove a strata here, take a strata there, because it was just a little bit complex. And what they realized is that as they're doing that, when they remove a strata, when they try to simplify things, it results in more work. Because they thought, oh, this is too much work, it's going to be too much work to maintain this. But then they remove a strata, the low strata, for example, and then suddenly there's more work because you have to weed instead of that low strata covering. And so what they're finding is now that every single project, every single area around the farm, they're trying to find ways to incorporate syntropic agroforestry dynamics, whether it's in the 10 hectares of grazing, whether it's in the grape systems for the wine, whether it's in the peppers. All these different systems are getting enthusiastic and trying to figure out, how do we incorporate this plant diversity? How do we incorporate these dynamics?
You cannot be afraid of pruning. So most of the trees are for pruning, create biomass, do photosynthesis, and it works really well when you have everything. And you will see a lot of mistakes even on the best parts. It goes very easily just with pruning and grafting on the soil directly.
And those avocados look healthy, they're flowering.
Yeah, but it's the the last 2 years they start become with this, with flowering and with this green. On the first years they struggle a lot.
How old are they now?
Here, and probably we have trunks from the eucalyptus also, and from poplars. We put here on the ground.
Good job.
Because this one, it's from last week, from the eucalyptus pruning, and we had a mulching like this in October, and it's gone. Like in February, you just have the truck. So the trunks really handle the weed suppression in some parts. And I also think it's good because it's a complex system. So when you have a larger scale and you have operators that are not so familiarized with the concept, if you have the trunks dividing and almost indicating where they have to put the mulch, the wood chips and the grasses, it's also good to have the trunk. It's not just a measure.
So you guys have a shredder going, a chipper.
Yeah. With the tractor, a good one. I need so badly to have shrubs everywhere or aromatic plants. We started wrong. Now we see it. At the time we did it, we just saw working hours. Now we are having the working hours, for example, where I have this lemon balm, and you see the corrections. We are putting more and putting other things. We will put other things. Here it's much easier than taking weeds out. It's just cutting, and you can have a business if you want to take something. And you will see another ones. You see here, for example, on this part and on those lines, we just cut it. It's much more easier. You don't have problems. It's always colder, the soil underneath. When you reach this point, it's much easier. But we should have. So now we are planting these guys and other guys everywhere. In my opinion, if you look at the work in Europe, the work of Felipe in Italy, for me that's the point. He always tells me, no, but you have the emergent layers. But for me it's so much more important.
In this climate,
and
there's
it's
such great plants for it as well that don't get so out of control. And
you see, if you have everything with this, or you could have in the middle of this ones, you could have the elderberry. I don't know, lots of plants, lavender, everything.
We got the grapes on the figs.
The grapes on the figs.
Cool.
Here you see, for example, the sage here on the base of the Oriops. It works really, really good when you have everything.
And so the main job now is to replant.
And replanting on clear spaces, it's much worse than doing everything right on the beginning.
The big takeaway for these guys is you want more biomass and you want more growth in the low strata, because that's what's going to reduce your weeding. You don't want to have to be paying people to hand weed the tree lines, especially when you have 2 hectares of systems. And so the way to avoid that, and the way that they're having to fix things now, because they didn't incorporate low strata everywhere successfully, they're having to go back and replanting these low strata species. I think one of the most successful ones for them was the African bush daisy. And other sites, it's Artemisia, rosemary, sage, Buddleia. Depends on the conditions, but your low strata herbaceous things are going to result in less weeding, and that's the goal. That's the goal everybody has. Nobody wants to weed a garden. Nobody wants to weed a food forest. And so get that low strata herbaceous layer. And that's one of the huge patterns that I saw across the whole Mediterranean on the trip to Europe. Nailing that low strata herbaceous layer is going to solve a lot of your problems. And it's with really efficient management. They've got 3 distinct layers they're managing. Their emergent support, which is either a eucalypt or a poplar. They've got their medium or their high strata cropping tree. And then you've got your low strata herbaceous underneath. And if you're managing the 2 supports, you're managing your middle layer for good cropping at commercial density. That's the winning recipe that they found. And really similar to the site that we just saw before with Matteo Mazzola, the paulownia, the apples, and the comfrey. Here, it's eucalypt or poplar, whatever fruit tree in the middle, and then your low strata. That's really the function of your gotta catch 'em all stage, your early collection years. For Matt Reese, it was a different emergent, different medium strata, and a different biomass on the edge. But in practice, it's the same. You're finding what species you can rely on for each strata to manage and not have to do the weeding. It's going to build fertility. That's the game. Another thing about really efficient management at the site in Portugal was mechanization. They're mechanized with a few different pieces of equipment. They've got a boom that they'll take up and prune the tops with, a platform that they'll stand on. They've got the electric pruning secateurs. They've got a chipper that they'll send everything through to mulch it up. And so just optimizing these systems for management, making things the right width, and just tailoring things to whatever equipment and gear you have available. Now, they're not going to be able to use the tractor with the platform if the soil is really wet. And so in the example here, they were pruning on a ladder because of the really wet soil conditions. And so sometimes you have to have some flexibility. But here you can see they're pruning the poplar up the pole with the electric secateurs.
And the grapes are being harvested for table grapes? Or?
No, for wine grapes. And then we produce vinegar. So the strategy, we have hot peppers every year. If I do some garlic, I have lemons. If I have vinegar, I can produce an awesome, on the factory, an awesome sauce, hot sauce. A Portuguese hot sauce with the peppers from here, just a little bit seasoning with the garlic, the lemon and the vinegar. So Paulo is the fastest guy we have. So you see the spinning with the pruning and with the electric scissor, yeah.
We don't have those in Costa Rica.
And then one last little detail about the raised irrigation. You can see it's raised up to about knee height along the lines rather than being on the ground, which is just really helpful for keeping it out of the way, whether it's for adding the mulch down. You don't want to be constantly covering and burying your irrigation, or finding leaks, or slashing it on accident with the machete. It just keeps it up out of the way, and it just reduces the amount of time you have to spend either doing repairs or working and fiddling with your irrigation, keeping it up, elevated, and out of the way.
Para mim foi dos maiores ensinamentos que a agrofloresta pôde me trazer com a viticultura. A arrogância do ser humano de pegar a uva e dizer, você vai produzir aqui.
Site number 7, this is really cool because it's one of the only projects I've seen working as an ecological agroforestry vineyard. Now, this site is really cool with Jose. He's in the south of Brazil. And the idea, the whole philosophy he's brought is we need to give the forests back to the vineyards. You heard me correctly. Give the forests back to the vineyards because grapevines are high strata climbers. They need other trees to climb. The philosophy that Jose brought was that it's arrogant of us. It's arrogance to take the vines out of the forest and expect them to be productive and healthy. I think the same way about a lot of these trees, whether it's citrus, whether it's avocados, mangoes, grapes, bananas. We take these trees out of their ecosystem and expect them and demand of them to be productive when they're in a totally different environment to which they came from. And so that's why creating the forest conditions, and I've seen that beautifully here at my site, is you recreate the forest conditions and things just become happier. They become way more tolerant to drought and stress. They need way less water. They're happier when you give the forest back to them. And so his whole philosophy is that we need to give the forest back to the vineyards. I love that, but in practice as well, I love how Jose has executed this because you can still see the very commercial structure of the vineyard, right? He's still got grapes on the trellis, 2 lines down the center, and then he's got these repeating patterns, these modules, where essentially each of the lines is a different organization of species, a different selection of strata layers optimized for maximizing sunlight. So we'll explain what this looks like, the layout of each module. He's got the lines for his grapes. Next to that, he's got blackberries on another trellis, right? 2 high strata species need a lot of sun, so there's not a lot of tall trees around them. The next line over, he's got plums and a nitrogen-fixing tree. Bracachinga, it's a native nitrogen-fixing tree from the area. So again, really simple. So far, we've got grapes, blackberries, and plums. The plums are the first ones so far that have an emergent support species with them. On the next line over, then we have a way more diverse line. We have citrus plus natives and eucalyptus. So this is kind of the high diversity line where there's other species, there's guavas, there's natives, along with the citrus. That's probably the tallest line of all of them because we've got the grapes, high strata, lots of sunlight. Same with the blackberries, low in height, there's not a lot of other trees above. The next line over where we have the plums, now we start getting some multi-strata stuff happening, the plums plus the nitrogen fixer. And then now in this one line further over, then we have a huge stack of species. We've got the citrus, we've got the natives, we've got the eucalyptus, a bunch of other species. That's our most diverse line. And then it goes back down in simplicity. Blueberries, yerba mate, and eucalyptus. And so what you're doing is you're creating this module that creates this wave pattern, right? And the wave pattern is to increase sunlight and reduce management to maintain your grapes, to maintain your blackberries. And the forest dynamics come in from these higher diversity, taller lines, but you're not overshadowing your grapes to create a system that's easy to manage, easy to delegate, and scalable. It's straightforward for commercial harvesting while also staying ecological. And to me, that's the trifecta. So, well done, Jose. Love the project. Really cool to visit.
Yeah, the soil is basically the worst you can get here in this area. It's like literally pure sand. We got this soil tested and it had like pH of 3, no available nutrients.
Site number 8. This is the largest syntropic farm in Europe. This is in Germany at Bozel, where they've got really sandy soil, really low rainfall, and it gets really cold. It snows here. And so this is a beautiful example for a few reasons of what they're doing, and why it's so inspirational is the implementation scale and the mechanization. Now there's a full video of this on YouTube breaking down all the systems, but I'm just going to cover the key highlights. One of the first is just the general mechanization of the management, right? Similar with the project in Portugal, they've got a pruning platform to prune the emergence, so they're not having to be up ladders, up in the tractor basket, going across, keeping things really straightforward, simple, and efficient. This behind me is one way that mechanized agroforestry can look. We've got the tractor with the arm and the basket, pruning our emergent trees, so we don't need to use ladders and pull pruners all day. Now there are still challenges with the management, because it is diverse and it is complex the way they've set these systems up, and especially there's confusion because the original designer and implementer of these systems is no longer at the farm. And so that highlights one of the big important pieces of maintaining good relationships with consultants and designers and farm managers, is that when you install a really complex system that kind of requires a person to be there, and this is something that Josh and I speak about a lot, is that you want to design yourself out of the system so that it doesn't need you to be there. And when you're installing these really complex, really dependent systems, if you're the brainchild and nobody else knows how to manage it, you're creating a lot of dependence on you for that farm. And I've seen lots of this. I've seen lots of abandoned systems that people paid tens of thousands of dollars for, and then the installer or the consultant just bails, and then people are stuck with like a big question mark, like, hey, what am I doing? What do I do with the system? Like, where's the assistance? Where's the help and the continued guidance? And so, anyways, that was a bit of a tangent. Back into the mechanization of Bozel is that they've done a really cool thing of modifying this potato planter, which is basically a big hopper where they would have a big seed mix, and they would basically be planting these little cups of seeds along an entire tree line as you're installing. Makes it really efficient. Leave it to the Germans to make things really efficient, of course. And that's how they were able to plant 9 kilometers of tree line in 2 days. Super interesting. You can see the mounds of mulch on each side. I think this was where they had the seeding equipment, the modified potato planter used to seed these lines. So it only took 2 days instead of what would have taken weeks. So we're gonna dive in, see what the system's all about.
How do we move kind of towards a landscape scale? You know, we have a 1,000-hectare farm of arable farming. We have big plots like this, big fields. This is actually a smaller one. It goes up to 80 hectares. This is about 26 that is fenced. And it's tricky to scale super diversified syntropic systems. So what we try to do here is employ some of these principles and design rows that kind of work within like a mechanized system. So we try to separate certain functions. Here you can see like 2 rows, which will be tree fodder rows for the most part. And we really focus on direct seeding. So we developed a small little implement that we showed you before, which can be tractor pulled, and we put a mixture of seeds and substrate in there, and we just go over these rows and seed them. So the idea is to have like almost exclusively direct seeded rows. But the idea was really how can we like dumb it down, simplify it as much as possible, essentially mechanize it, you know, just having a couple tractor passes to bring the seed into the soil and then to mulch, right? Prepare the soil, bring the seeds in, mulch, and that's it. And let's see if that works, right? So far we haven't seen that many tree seedlings yet, but they might take a little while to actually show up, some maybe even a couple years. But hopefully in the end this will be a very diverse hedgerow with very, very little input.
This most recent season, my understanding is they've planted 50 hectares in one season of a new agroforestry system, after last year planting I think about 28 hectares of a new system. So they just keep on expanding their ability to implement new systems. Now, again, the challenge might come in the management of this because they're complex systems. They're not super planned and straightforward of what's going to come up at what meter, because you have no idea. When you're planting everything from seed, it's a lot more nuance and understanding of these systems to be able to decide which trees to keep, which to field graft, based on the spacing. But nonetheless, really cool. And especially the way they're sourcing their plants. That's one of the biggest takeaways that I had was the way they're sourcing their plants is from a local fruit juicing facility. And so they'll take the extra pulp, because once they're juicing the fruits, pulp is the byproduct, and it has all these different fruit tree seeds in it from local growers in the whole area. They take the pulp, they plant the pulp in their tree line, and then this huge diversity of locally tested genetics comes up. And they have all these fruit seedlings to work with, options to field graft or let to just fruit wild and see what happens. All the fruit trees in this whole system were planted for free from seed in a pulp. Like the pulp was just laid in the tree line with the seeds in the pulp, and the trees germinated, and they're being field grafted now to be productive fruit trees. I'm super interested. It's a great way of doing things for free, connecting with local resources.
So there was planted trees or planted woody perennials. We have poplars and different pioneer species or support species, and in between it's all the sea buckthorn. So every meter there's one plant planted, and then everything else you see in here is all from seed. And yeah, this is a pear.
So the main trees are pear, plum, apple, and you said quince?
We have quince in here because I think it was in the pulp. It wasn't really planned. We're not planning to really produce quince, but we started seeing them sprouting up, so it's kind of fun.
There we go.
And maybe they produce some nice fruit without being grafted. Who knows? We will see.
But I love that idea so much of using like this slurry of pulp with seeds in it and just smearing that into your tree lines.
Yeah, and you wouldn't expect that the seeds survive this process, but actually most of the seeds are completely intact. And the beauty is you need to ferment the seeds anyways, because the seed is adapted to get digested, to germinate. And so this process just combines bringing this fermentation process, starting this fermentation process, and delivering the seeds with some extra fertilizer in the soil, basically.
Yeah, it makes it a really convenient process for where do I source 400 apple seeds with different genetics too, because you said it's not a factory, it's not a processing plant as much as it's a place for the community to come and just juice their fruits. And so it's genetics from locally around here, you were saying.
Exactly.
Well, fruit trees are around here, and that's very important. You can't just go to like a big factory and get Pink Lady and all those kind of seeds, because those genetics won't be great rootstock, and you don't have control about it on it. Don't have control anyway. When you seed this pulp, you'll get lots of different varieties, lots of different genetics, and then you'll have to see which one perform well, which one graft well, and then hopefully they have traits that also work for your variety that you're grafting onto it. So it's definitely, there will be some trial and error, but you have so many plants to choose from. Like if you just look at this, like this is essentially all fruit trees. So this is all pear that came out of these seeds. Here we have an apple tree, which is still a wild apple, a non-grafted one, a seedling, and this here is grafted. So this one was actually grafted last summer in August, and now can you see this? Like right here, that's the chip graft. And so in March, just went after the buds started swelling, so we cut it back here, so all the hormones go into this bud that was planted in here, and it becomes the main leader of the plant. And now we just have to come through here and clean this up a little bit, take all the other branches out, so that this one kind of takes over, because we don't really want the rootstock to be growing. We just want to have the grafted variety on there. And yeah, as simple as that, 3 or 4 years, and then we come here and start grafting in more humid, warmer climates. Probably it works after 1 or 2 years. Some people in Austria are definitely doing it after like 1 year even. But yeah, for us it takes some time, but then we have the perfect rootstock here, right? Developed on its own root, never transplanted. And let's hope it's gonna be a long-lasting, vigorous tree.
And this came after, so this isn't the first system that was planted here. This system came after the first area which we visited earlier, you'll see it, where there were some trials and errors, and you realized that, hey, the seed-grown trees are just way healthier, way more vigorous, way more adept at dealing with these relatively tough conditions. By the way, continental Germany, somebody said like 300 to 400 mils of rain per year.
Yeah,
very sandy soil.
Yeah, exactly. The average was like in the last 20 years, maybe 500 to 600, but in the last 10 or 5 years it was like 3 to 500 like maximum. We had some more rain last year, but basically we had a lot of drought during the last years, and during one of those droughts we found out that basically the seeds were not struggling at all with drought and heat stress, where the big grafted trees from a tree nursery that were sometimes like this high, they were not adapted at all and they were almost dying completely. So yeah, the beauty here is we don't have to irrigate at all. The bigger ones in this in the old system, we had to irrigate in those crazy dry seasons sometimes, but here we have the most resilient tree you can think of, and such a nice genetic diversity. So it's a win-win. You might wait a little bit longer for the tree to bear some fruits, but I always say if you have a healthier tree, you might wait like 3 years longer, but have 20 years more fruit because it's more healthy. That's a good trade-off, I would say.
And yeah, it works really well. You get such a high diversity that the biggest challenge is to figure out which ones to keep and how to manage them, essentially. And also because, you know, the fruit seeds are everywhere, like where to graft, what are the right distances and all that. And sometimes you graft 3 in one spot and they all work out, and then you graft 3 over there and you don't get any. So, you know, it takes some time, but as you said, it's very low input other than labor, and that kind of makes it attractive, and it's just super vigorous also compared to planted systems, I would say.
But again, the challenge is going to be getting skilled labor and skilled people to manage that and to understand how to graft which ones, which decisions to make. And so it seems like there's always a trade-off of ease of installation and efficiency, sourcing material, but also understanding how to manage these and make them into productive systems. I'm super excited. Bozel is a beautiful example. I'm excited to see how they pull this off, what the management looks like over the next 5, 10, 20 years as these systems establish. Now, another really great practice they're doing is with the air prune beds sourcing material. So it's not just what's planted directly in the field as seeds or herbaceous cuttings, but also the air prune beds allows them to have long-term high-value crops, things like chestnuts or persimmons, growing that they can then fill the gaps with in the tree lines. And so you have your chestnuts or your walnuts or your pecans or whatever high-value tree, and then once you identify the gaps in the system, you can take those out of the air prune beds and plug them in. So it's a really great combination. Direct seeding for your early succession fruit trees and your herbaceous and your cuttings and your support species, but also your long-term high-value crops are still getting the guaranteed germination in the air prune beds and then planted out into the field.
Chestnut, so here Castanea sativa, Castanea crenata crossing by seed works perfectly. I went a little bit thicker, how do you say? I have a
Yeah, they're deeper.
Deeper.
These are like almost half meter. They're like up to knee height. Obviously, there's the gap below with the ground, but these are deeper than I'm used to making. So super cool.
We don't need to explain air pruners again, don't we? We don't need, right?
They know what they are.
All right, nice. So yeah, I went deeper because I want to have the option to leave them 2 years, and then the substrate is sucking down, or how would you say? I'm not a native speaker.
The soil level when you make air prune beds, it drops over the course of 12 months, 24 months, and so having them deeper just gives you more soil to work with.
Yeah, you need to consider that. So I use compost here from my friend Lawrence, make a substrate out of it, put some perlite inside to make it drainage and more fluffy, and then basically also mulch it on top, depends on what you use. And then, yeah, let's go over there and see this chestnut. Here I have khaki, frost tolerant khaki. Maybe you have that at your place as well from Virginia.
Frost tolerant persimmon, nice.
Yeah, I'm also experimenting. I'm getting seeds from Lebanon. I have connections to Lebanon, like Quercus libani, frost tolerant oak from the mountains. So it's dry over there. Gets very cold, and the same with khaki, the same with pomegranate. Yeah, and then I try them out here with fig as well and other fruit trees. Basically, yeah, when I'm traveling, I take seeds and I try to exchange from climate that makes sense for here.
It's a big part of the work for agroforesters. Exchange seeds, go travel, go find analog climates and swap seeds around.
Like back in the day, yeah, that was the most valuable thing you can bring somewhere, seed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so here's the chestnut. I have to do some weeding, but it's coming very well. It has nice microclimate over here. I put them very dense so they will prune themselves and go up. Yeah, then we have nice roots. So after they're through the first phase, I will open it up, do the weeding, and then later this year when we are ready to plant, I just open it from the side, take them out, bring them to their spot, plant them, and as I said, also create a microclimate, give them a pioneer tree, first succession, second succession, so sunflower or hemp or cedar or and then pioneer tree, and underneath some to close the ground, to cover the ground.
This is great.
Yes.
Air prune beds at Bozel.
Exactly. You can put whatever you want to plant in terms of trees over there. Wild fruit trees, like local, collect your local seeds, wild plum, wild apple, wild pear, produce your seedlings, put them to the field, let them adapt, graft them. There you go. Bless.
That's the recipe. Now, one thing about these systems that does need resolving, and I'm sure they're going to figure that out, is the hand weeding. This is one that a lot of other systems have nailed. A lot of hand weeding still happens here. Apparently they're taking like 2+ months with teams of volunteers to hand weed all these different systems. I mean, there's tens of hectares of systems here that do need hand weeding, and so part of that's going to be figuring out what's the herbaceous layer that we can get away with to reduce having to do that. Because at the moment, the herbaceous layers were still super diverse, and I think that part of the experimentation phase is to identify which of the herbaceous species is going to perform the best to multiply and double, not just double or triple, but like quadruple down, like for real, on the low strata herbaceous species that eliminate your need to hand weed. That's kind of the holy grail, is finding that species that's going to occupy that low strata. For Matteo Mazzola, it was comfrey. For Matt Reese in Florida, it was the grass. For the site in Golega at the ketchup factory, it was African bush daisy. And so part of this work in the early years is finding out which species is it and how do we macro propagate to get it everywhere. But ultimately very excited about all the field grafting they're going to be doing, cutting the trees at year 3, 4, pasting on known genetics. And the idea is that eventually these agroforestry plots will become profitable. There was some really cool research they've been doing both on the microbiology side of things and seeing how the agroforestry systems are improving the microbiology in the land, but also on the economic side of things. They're doing research, and there's some really cool agricultural economic research they did with some projections, which again, these are projections, but they're basically saying that in this area, 1 hectare of arable farming can get you about 1,000 to 2,000 euros per season per hectare. But by year 10 of these agroforestry systems, the projections are saying anywhere between 75 and 200,000 euros per hectare of these agroforestry systems. Now, obviously, that's a big range, and it depends a lot on how you manage the system, what you're optimizing for, what you're creating, whether you're wholesaling or whether you're creating a value-added product. My understanding is that's the plan here at Bozel, is to use these fruits in a like multi-fruit and berry grain bar, so some kind of value-added bar product, using the agroforestry products, using the grains that they're growing on the farm to create a profitable agroforestry system to link in with the other profitable ventures, because they've already got other branches of the foundation here on the farm that are operational and profitable. They've got the forestry, they've got the cattle, they've got the arable farming, and so those are all helping to fund the agroforestry, which eventually, again, based on these projections, based on any possible value adding, can be kind of another pillar, not just of how to be profitable, but also just creating a template for how agroforestry can look in these kind of areas.
Different aromatics, and you could really grow a ton of cool things, and we're already getting a pretty good berry crop. So for us, it's a bit hard to market this kind of system because the amounts are so small for what we're usually marketing here at scale. But I like the system a lot because when we get all kinds of growers visiting us, and hopefully, my dream scenario is that we have a great solution, agroforestry solution for every farmer that comes here, so some inspiration for everyone.
So super cool. Love the work they're doing. Didn't even mention the pine project, but the retrofit of a monoculture pine plantation into a syntropic island. Love that. That's a whole video on YouTube you can go see. But the diversity there, the process of arranging the organic material, the pros and cons of that, really impressive. There's so many different systems at Bozel. That's why it deserved to be on this top 10 list. And it was just a huge pleasure to go there because there's not a lot of temperate examples. So kudos to the team there, what you guys are doing. Awesome work. Hey, just a heads up, I'm looking for new farms to visit in the year 2026. If you've got an idea of cool projects or cool locations, hubs for agroforestry, or you've got an awesome project, leave a comment with the location and a link to your project. I'll check them all out, and other people can use it to find your project too. Leave it as a comment below.
We believe like working with successional agroforestry, syntropic approach is the way of doing this. I mean, using the dynamics of the Mediterranean forest in order to create conditions to have even agriculture again.
Number 9, this is a very similar system in terms of inspiration. It's Amadeo in South Italy. This is where Felipe and Diana are doing the most incredible work that I saw in all of Europe, I think. And the reason is because they've got decades of experience working in syntropic agroforestry alongside Ernst, doing lots of publishing, lots of research, and lots of practical work on the ground. They were part of the initiation that created that video that you've probably seen called Life in Centropy. It's what activated lots of people about bringing an awareness to agroforestry, syntropic agroforestry. And one of the cool things that I didn't even realize is that I was reading articles that Felipe wrote like 4 or 5 years ago. There's a really great one called Eucalyptus is the Scapegoat of Society. Basically, we blame all our problems on the eucalyptus, but at the end of the day, we're the ones planting the eucalyptus in a damaging way. And so people have this negative reputation of eucalyptus, but it's because of how we plant and manage it. It's not the eucalyptus fault. There's no such thing as bad, a bad plant in nature. It's just how we plant and manage it.
We are in an infected zone of this phytosanitary crisis that was attributed to a bacteria called Xylella fastidiosa that creates a syndrome of fast desiccation of the olives, and that changed completely the region. So it's been a tragedy. It's been not only an ecological tragedy and economical tragedy because people lost, the way of living, the farmers, but also in the level of the landscape, because people lost the identity that they had with the place where they grew up with. When we arrived, 0.1 organic matter in the soil. We have salinized water, so very limited conditions. And in the middle of an infected zone that it was focused on olives only.
So one of the coolest things that I saw on the farm that I took away was this idea of signal and noise. Basically, how much signal are you producing, which is like how much can you connect with people who come to your farm, versus noise, stuff that's not relevant or isn't understandable. And so the way they've really tackled this and brought this approach to the farm is that they've got multiple different entry points that people from various contexts can come to learn, be inspired, and activated by syntropic agroforestry.
We did 4 different designs, for different purposes as well. Because as I said here, one of these problems is that young people, they're trying to live. For example, this area where we are now is 2,000 square meters. So we wanted to show that, and this is the reality of many backyards that people have around. It's not uncommon for people to have access to this size of land. And here we have over, almost 90 fruit trees, and we harvested a lot of tomatoes. We have a lot of vegetables in the beginning and very little water. So I think, and also this was built as a garden style, but was with many landscape aspects. Mm-hmm. And so this was really aimed to show, to find something that it could be beautiful, but also useful, to harvest, not only those gardens that you
ornamental.
See, you take pictures, it's nice and very energy demanding, but with no harvest. And so it would be more this interactive garden that people could come and eat, and especially here in the Mediterranean, the paradise of aromatic plants. So it's almost like aromatherapy when we work with those plants. So this is the situation. Then we have another one that is a similar size, a little bit bigger than this, but we did a design for vegetable production in arid conditions like this. So adding much more plants and doing a design like on purpose and almost like as a provocative, with a provocative intention, to show that in the drier the place, the more plants we need to put to have our vegetables. That is our system over there. That is also very packed, very dense.
And I like the newest update of that system where you're saying it's we'll take a look, but it's like a single line of vegetables just smushed between these 2 hedgerows of aromatics.
Yeah, no, we definitely discussed that. I think it's and it's working well. And then we did the fruteto, which was an idea to embrace the traditions, because it was originally a 10 by 10 olive field, and where most of the olives already died, and they took them away. And but we wanted to honor this tradition, so we kept this density of 100 plants per hectare, but we added a lot of fruits in the middle. I mean, that is the most also. It's a place that we have more to talk about failures, because things that didn't went too well. Also the most challenging place, and also, I mean, challenging implementation that it's sometimes happens. And because there, since it's eradicated the olives, so they were doing, I mean, the previous owners or previous people, they were doing grain, like a grain cultivation, and so the place was really more exhausted. And the other design that we have is one that is, I mean, I think it's coming out very nicely, and it has also a very nice input from Ernst. Also, he challenged and provoked this idea of having olive trees very close together as almost like a hedgerow, but not in a monoculture, of course, but in a multi-layer, in a very diverse successional system. There it was a 12 by 12 olive system, where the olives are still there with a local variety, and we wanted just to enrich this place and also add fruits and complete the system with the whole dynamics of the Mediterranean. So yeah, and I think that design is quite nice.
So on one side of things, you have small backyard homeowners who might just have a backyard garden, and that's the context that they're familiar with, and so they've got a demonstration system for that. But they've also, on the opposite side of the scale, got a large multi-hectare olive plantation that they've retrofitted into Syntropic agroforestry for that context. And they've got everything in between. Market garden based on Mediterranean dynamics, a fruit orchard based on Mediterranean dynamics, and this olive plantation. And so it's really cool the way they've gone through very thoughtfully at each of these different scales, right? With the small garden having nests and lines, feeling very organic, super diverse. And that's where they started. That's the most experimental, where they're learning about the different plant dynamics, learning about different management cycles. And one of the key things that you're observing here, this is kind of like the catch-em-all stage from Matt Reese, is you're observing. You're making observations, especially in this climate, about photosynthesis at different times of the year. And we'll talk about this in a little bit, but how photosynthesis changes in the different canopy layers throughout the season. In the Syntropic market garden, this kind of fit one of the most standard frameworks of about 5 meters between tree lines where they had fruit trees, and then growing your multiple beds of vegetables, and in the Mediterranean context, perennial aromatic herbs in between. And the herbs are actually what are supporting the vegetables. So you're growing them right next to each other, almost in the same line as your vegetables for support. So your tomatoes are growing up with the rosemary, and these perennial herbs are what are providing the ground cover, the mulch, and the pruning dynamic that allows your vegetables to thrive with minimal watering, because here they had really salty water, and so they can't just be pouring on the irrigation. I think they were irrigating about 7 times per season in this area. And so they had to really tailor this to low irrigation, hot, dry Mediterranean conditions. And one of the best parts about this system is that it's, again, built for their machinery. It's built for their equipment. Their 2-wheel walk-behind tractor fits perfectly down these lines between the rows of aromatics, plants the vegetables. Once the vegetables are done, it mulches them, and then you can replant that same line after you're cutting your herbs. It's a beautiful dynamic and a very clear example of what these Mediterranean systems can look like, with almost a near perennial ground cover of aromatics. You've got your trees and your vegetables.
Instead of doing like those 75 or 80 centimeter beds, we adopted just 40 centimeter beds. And this also, I must say, it's been also a dialogue with Ernst, and I love that during this dialogue there is a lot of inputs as well, and so ideas emerge. And he was saying, Felipe, 40 centimeter beds, let's go for 40 centimeter beds. And he's absolutely right. It makes it easier for us also to work like this. And so we decided to have just single lines like this, the aromatics in the middle. And the goal here is we can come with a motor cultivator and with the trincha, I don't know in English how is that one, with the knives?
I don't know the name of that one, but we'll show a picture.
Okay, you show a picture of those. And after, for example, after the tomato are done, I mean, after we need to remake it, we just come with that trincha with knives, with the BCS and those like narrow ones. And the aromatics here, they will be basically on the paths. So the goal is, as this tomato will outgrow this aromatics, we'll keep them a little bit lower, we'll prune them a little bit, and so it will be on top of these two aromatic lines. And then after we harvest, the aromatics take over. So there is no 1 centimeter of soil exposed after the harvest. So there's really, and then there will be disposing of aromatics, and then we prune. We come with the BCS, with the trincha, and then of course they're vegetables. The soil is not really prepared for it, so we can add a layer of compost, another layer of a straw, whatever, and we plant them, and then we have our aromatics on the side, basically on the path. So here it is the space only for the tires of our motocultivator.
And the next system that they expanded to from there was the syntropic fruit production at an even bigger scale, where they're taking target fruit crops per each line, and then they're taking the winning herbaceous plants from their earlier experiments, because each year they're expanding. They're taking their winning herbaceous layers and putting them into those lines, right? Lower diversity, more function, as you figure out which ones work. We spoke a little bit about what that might want to look like at Bozel. And so they're focusing a dedicated crop production per line, for example, citrus, pomegranate, figs, cherries, and within each line they're going multiple medium strata fruit trees, some high strata fruit trees, and then the occasional emergent, right? Pear, cherry. And so their lines are alternating between this fruit tree pattern, and the next line over is a mulberry grape line. So kind of how we saw the mulberries on the willow at the Portugal project, well here it's going to be mulberries and grapes. Another example of vita maritate, which is grapes growing on trees. And one of the interesting things that they were doing here that I asked a question about is, why are you planting grafted trees? Because sometimes the grafted trees were suffering, and from my own experience I know if you plant a seed of a fruit tree, it's going to grow way better than a grafted tree. And so I said, why aren't you planting fruit trees from seed, specifically the avocados, because the avocados are really suffering? And the thing that I loved Felipe's answer to this, because he said that they're trying to keep it honest and approachable to farmers. Farmers here are not used to planting seeds in the ground for their trees. Maybe in Brazil, where they're used to planting cacao seeds in the ground, that's part of the culture, great. But in Italy, it's not part of the culture. And so what they're trying to do is make this as approachable as possible to farmers. And so by doing that, they're keeping themselves honest and saying, can this practice of syntropic agroforestry work and fix the disease problems and fix the problems of struggling trees as close to matching the context that they're coming from traditional farmers as possible? Can we not change the whole process? Can we just change the dynamic, keep it honest, and does it still work? And I think that was a beautiful answer to that. Can this same pruning and diversity dynamic fix what's broken about agriculture? Again, we see a lot of farmers leaving Italy and abandoning rural land and farms because it's challenging, it's hard. And so really admire the work they're doing here, Felipe and Diana, to bring new life and inspiration back to these landscapes.
And of course, a lot of aromatics in the bottom, and all the bushes and everything else. And here is a little bit more simplified because we have to facilitate harvest, so we decided for 1 per line, 1 fruit tree as a main one. And but it's still diverse, because one thing that we were also mentioning before, here we don't have a benchmark to understand what is the vocation of the place. We just don't go to a neighbor and say, okay, this is a place that is good for this or that. I mean, here they did olives, and olives were not working anymore, and any other like a kind of crop was still like a question mark for us. What would be the vocation and the most suitable thing? So we had to start with some diversity as also a safeguard to us, rather than, okay, let's do this. That would be very risky at the beginning. And so we have our marketing and product development team that are already with what we have, thinking on possible product.
The last large system that they were doing at Amadeo was the olive retrofit, where previously they were planted the olives on a 12 by 12 meter grid. And the cool thing about this that they've done was they basically just created a 12 meter by 12 meter module around the existing olives. And so previously it was just every 12 meters on a grid, olives and grass, old olives, maybe 60 plus years old, but a lot of disease pressure. And so they're hoping that this system will resolve that disease pressure. They're aiming, and again, this is a project that Ernst is consulting at as well and helping out with. And so they're aiming for an olive hedgerow down the existing olive lines, and then in between, so on 6 meters off of those olive lines, if they're originally at 12, a line in between that a really diverse fruit line with multi-strata. So you've got 4 medium strata in each of the 12-meter modules, 2 high strata, and 1 emergent like a pecan or maybe a cherry. And then you've got a bunch of aromatics for the low strata. And so it turns from this very two-dimensional system with the grass and the olives into this really three-dimensional system where you've got the olives, but that's going to become a hedgerow, and then the next line over at 6 meters, you've got this huge diversity of multi-strata fruit operation happening, the aromatics, and then even more recently they're adding another line in between, so 3 meters off of the fruit line with a new succession of vegetables and aromatics. And so you can see very quickly how this olive and grass situation with a lot of disease pressure is quickly transforming into kind of what it looked like in the fruit area or in the market garden area, an understory covered in perennial aromatics and herbs, and the overstory with fruit.
And so we are talking about fruit, olives, 6 meters, and in the middle we added another aromatic line. Because the aromatics are, that it started to be almost like, as we mentioned, the weed or our, the equivalent of the grasses in the tropics, but can also become like a good commercial harvesting crop as well, because we've been speaking to experts and also reading like a scientific literature, and when there is the aromatics are growing in diverse systems like here, or when they are growing in the wild and not in monocultures as they are commercially, they produce more secondary metabolites. So the kind of also the disturbance that we promote here that mimics a natural environment, they stimulate this plant to produce different molecules and more complex molecules. So we are also not only for those aromatics, but we are pointing at quality of fruits, quality of oil, quality, oils for the olives, and quality of oil from the aromatics, because of the dynamics of this system, the way we are intending to manage these systems. And here, for example, in this line, we have sage. We have lavender. Still very small, but they are growing. We planted recently, and of course we have the vegetables that we add in between. So this year, since we did basically the whole line, so we have almost 5 kilometers of new lines with aromatics and vegetables, and that's why we didn't plant over there, because we'll have just a massive production this year, and they're all super nice, super happy.
And I think this is a really beautiful example of how do you roll a project like this out from over the last 4 years, starting at kind of the food forest, backyard garden context and scale, moving to the market garden system, the fruit orchard, and then now the olive system retrofit. It's this beautiful scaling and progression, and again, creating this really cool entry points in terms of the signal and noise, lots of entry points for people of various backgrounds and contexts to come in and feel inspired, like they can actually do something with this information. And the cool thing is that they're combining all these traditional crops from the area, but they're combining them in a really elegant way. Citrus, olives, grapes, grains, aromatics, these are all conventional, traditional things of the area, but they were never combined in this way to make it mechanized, to give it this dynamic and this multi-successional harvesting. It's just this really beautiful thing that they're doing. Huge kudos to you guys, the whole team, Felipe, Diana, the whole team at Amadeo. Huge kudos to you guys. And one of the things that stood out to me the most was, and I referenced this before, but what you're paying attention to in those early years, when you're in that gotta catch 'em all stage, right, the collection stage, you're paying attention to, at different times of the year, what layer is doing the most photosynthesis. Because in the Mediterranean, the dynamic is different than in the tropics, for example, where in summer, most of the photosynthesis is happening up high in the canopy. But in winter, the canopy is maybe deciduous, more of the photosynthesis is happening down low in the aromatic layer. And so you want to make sure you have all these different strata filled, and you're making these observations earlier in your experiments so that you can apply the lessons as you scale and expand. And that's one thing that they've done a really beautiful job with, even being relatively new to the Mediterranean climate. Like, most of their work has been done in the tropics in Brazil, and so doing a fantastic job of learning and iterating on these dynamics in the Mediterranean. Excellent work, Felipe and Diana and the whole team.
It's something like, oh, he's a crazy guy.
Yeah.
Okay. Accept to be a crazy guy. Accept.
Yeah, embrace it.
Yeah, embrace it to be a crazy guy. And the crazy guy has more freedom than... We are living in a paradise, and our whole planet is a parabalance. And the hell, negative part, we see it's in us and not outside of us.
The Yoda of the forest, Ernst Götsch, the man himself, the legend. I did have the opportunity to go there a few years ago when I was in Brazil, and the cool thing is I did not plan to meet him. I did not plan to go there. It just unfolded really naturally. There was a lot of really cool lessons, and one of them was that, man, the culture in Brazil, but also with Ernst, is that you're up at 5 a.m. you're working. So I was told that I need to be there at 5, so I had to walk half an hour earlier because I was staying down the road, and so I was walking at like 4:30 in the morning down this road. And one of the things I remember is as I was arriving to his farm, the air changed. I could smell the air differently because you could just almost smell all the heavy pruning. It wasn't a stagnant forest, but you could smell this dynamic of life. And that was one of the first indicators. I was like, oh wow, this is like a very different thing.
It's just after 5 a.m. I'm walking on that same road that I came in on the bus. I'm walking to go meet the old man of the forests. If you know, you know. So I'm walking by a section of this forest that's been radically pruned, and the forest actually smells different. I've been walking and I'm noticing a distinct change in the smell and how things in the air. It's unbelievable.
I was staying at his daughter's place, Gudrun. She has a factory where she buys and collects fruit from other farms, and she makes these bars. She makes these like really cool edible bars, and it's just a really clever way of adding value and making use of these agroforestry products. So when I arrived at Ernst's place, it was fantastic. We basically had all day to kind of have conversation, manage the areas that he's working on, and he got to explain to me what the main work is that he's doing now, which is essentially, he's scaled down from reforesting over 500 hectares around his house, which is like just kind of an incomprehensible amount of land to reforest. But you send the drone up and you can see it's just like endless forest that didn't used to be there. Maybe you've seen the movie Avatar with the blue people. Yeah, kind of felt like that. Just crazy, unbelievable jungle. But the work that he's transitioned to now is scaling back down and managing just about 2 hectares around the house. Intensive production of cacao. That's his target crop. And so the main work that he's doing, and this is a lot of the work that we spent together doing, was managing the border, managing the jungle around the edges to keep from encroaching into the highly managed areas, because it's a jungle. It grows fast out there, and this once you kind of get that flywheel in motion of reforesting an area, it just wants to turn into forest, which is a really cool process to see and compare it to kind of all the degraded land around in the area. And so what he's doing, and one of my favorite drone shots is this, and I'll pause it here, but you can see how he's resetting the oldest systems that he planted, the oldest trees, the oldest forest areas, fully resetting them, cutting them down, reorganizing them, and using that as a foundation to replant new systems with higher fertility, more organic matter, and just this natural fertility that you've built up over the last 30 years by planting these trees and rebuilding the natural ecology. I mean, it was such a crazy feeling to be at these Brazil nut trees, for example, that he planted in 1995, the year that I was born. He said, that's when I planted that tree. And I'm looking at this huge tree. It's like this big, and I'm looking up, and there's these huge Brazil nuts, and like I said, unfathomable scale that he's planted to and reforested in such a short amount of time. It was really insightful to be there, working at the boundaries on the new system that he's resetting and planting. And you can actually kind of see on the map the previous years that he's been resetting these same kind of areas and how they're going through that same transition of early succession vegetables, secondary fruit trees, and then eventually it'll become this big giant forest again that gets cut down, resets. And one of the things that I took away from here that I've really settled into now, but initially was super confusing, was planting up the slope. My whole permaculture career I had been told, you got to plant on contour, otherwise you're going to be creating erosion and all of this. But every site that I went to in Brazil, they were all planting up the slope, and I thought, have you guys never read a permaculture book? What's going on? Why are you planting off contour and up the slope? And I finally understood it. After weeks of confusion from being there, it's easier to manage. And I was confused. I didn't understand it. I didn't get it. I didn't fully understand. Until I went to Ernst's place, I was managing those systems, helping to plant. And I that's when I got it. I understood. I was like, all right, well, these guys are onto something. If this is how they're doing it, it's way easier to be walking up the slope and planting and managing walking up the slope, walking up and down with crates to harvest, rather than walking along contour with heavy crates. You're not able to access as easily. Up and down the slope is my priority now. It just makes management easier. Access, of course, on contour. We can make a whole video about this, but the major access, go ahead on contour, but in between those contours, up and down the slope for managing. So a couple other things that I really took away from Ernst's place is that there was a brief conversation we shared about a parasitic snail. And he said something to the effect of, I have no enemies here. There are no enemies on this planet. And he said basically it's all feedback. Even if the leafcutter ants fully defoliate a tree and destroy it and kill it, he says thank you. He says thank you for showing me where I have committed an error. Because nature doesn't make any mistakes. And so when you make a mistake, it's going to show you. And he basically says thank you to nature for showing him where he committed the error. Thank you for communicating this to me. It's a predator of, so it eats snails.
It's a snail too. It's a snail, but it's a predator. All the other snails, I know they eat plants.
Yeah.
But this one eats animals.
So this is your friend.
Oh no, the other ones are my friends too. I have no enemies. In fact, there are no enemies on this planet. Yeah. If I am alone, I even sing and enjoy the birds singing and enjoy the sun every day. Then I'm working and always think, oh, they did this. Thank you that you did that. And the other bird, that, and this, that plant, that, all together. Okay. And then there are some problems because I committed an error. Oh, what was the error I committed? Oh yeah, for this reason. Thank you, Bach, that you communicated it to me.
And so it's a really framework, mind-shifting philosophy from like, oh no, what's wrong with this nature versus, what have I done that's wrong? And it was this beautiful shift in just the way you think about living amongst the natural world. And we're part of this intelligent world. And this is an Ernst quote, but we think that we're the intelligent ones, but really we're just part of an intelligent system. And that's, I think, a beautiful example of that. One of the other technical kind of interesting things is that, in this 2-hectare area around the house that he's actively managing, primarily for cacao, it was really interesting because he showed me the impact of heavy pruning. Heavily pruning the cacao, very quickly it's refoliated and it's doing 10 times more photosynthesis. You can just see how much bigger, more vigorous and active the leaves are on the heavily pruned cacao, doing way more photosynthesis and growth than the ones that were left unpruned. That was the first thing. But the second really interesting observation was that because cacao is a target crop, it's mostly cacao in that medium strata. And so, for example, if you took glasses and you just kind of looked almost like Terminator glasses, like you just only looked at the medium strata, you would just basically see a monoculture of cacao. Now, you take the glasses off and you look up strata, down strata, you see all the diversity, but you only look at this strata, you see really focused production. And so the whole system is tailored to that. The whole system is optimized for cacao production. And it makes it really easy when you're not trying to optimize for 12 different species of producing, but you learn your crop, you learn how to prune it, you learn how to manage the dynamics, the timing, all of that. Much more simple, much more straightforward. So that's kind of one of the key lessons. As you're focusing, as you're refining it, and we saw this example with all the growers, once you're finding what you're doing, it becomes way easier to manage and you become more focused. Those were some of the key takeaways from Ernst and all the other farms. Now, for sticking around this long, I actually do have a bonus site for you. I've added it to the end of the list. There's one more site. This is the crazy difference of 2 meters. This is in the tree line where all the material is being placed, and this is the native soil here. I'm not planting hardly any fruit trees at the moment, mostly just has planted grass and eucalypts and acacia. Support species to continue chopping and dropping and pruning and managing and organizing the organic material into these tree lines, which you can see. You can see just right here, and then organic matter turning into soil. Organic material, you don't want to just spread it everywhere, you want to concentrate it in specific areas where you will be planting, where you will be wanting improved soil conditions. Number 11, it's a bonus system because it's not actually an operating farm yet, but it's such a cool example, so I had to share. And this is my friend Antonio's site in northeast Brazil. Now, I was here about 2 years ago, and he had been planting this site for I think 6 years at the time, but because he spends a lot of time away, he doesn't live on site, he spends a lot of time going and working at other agroforestry projects to learn skills, earn more money, but the conditions here were really poor on the farm, like really sandy, poor soil, and he doesn't live there full time, so it wouldn't have made sense for him to go and invest a lot of money in expensive fruit trees to plant them onto poor land, right? So what he's been doing is basically global planting. The thing that I advocate for is just planting support species for the first number of years, managing those to passively improve the land. At intervals, occasionally he'll come to the land, he'll prune some trees, drop the organic matter down, and let the process do its thing. And you can see the difference, the before and after of the soil conditions, where he's accumulating this organic matter and where he's not. It's almost like ready and rich compost ready to be planted into. He's not importing any material, he's not importing a bunch of mulch or compost to do this. He's literally just planting his eucalyptus and acacias, coming back every now and then to manage them, and letting the land passively improve. And using his time to go around Brazil, train agroforestry, get better, earn more money, and then come back to the land, improve things, and then go back and travel again. And the whole while, the land is improving and getting more and more ready to accept fruit trees of higher succession, higher value. So really cool strategy. Just wanted to share that. That was also my first time using a chainsaw 5-6 meters up in a tree, so it was a really special time back to when I wasn't really familiar and comfortable with all this stuff, you know, in the way that I am now. And so, beautiful example. Hopefully you took something away from this video. Hopefully you took some interesting insights from each of these projects, or at least one thing that you can take away and apply to your farm. And if you enjoyed this, leave a comment. What'd you learn? What was the big takeaway for you? And I'll see you in the next one.